Want to start an Airbnb business but don't know what Airbnb business model is right for you? Well, then stay tuned because today's video is for you. In today's video, I'm going to cover 5 different ways that you can get into the Airbnb business and start to build and maintain wealth for yourself as well as generational wealth for years to come. So while I'm going to talk about 5 different ways that you can build your Airbnb business model, they really break down into 2 overarching categories. And those are where you don't own the property and where you do own the property. So there's different directions that you can go given where you are in your current life, what your finances will allow you to do, and that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna go over the first one, which is where you don't own a property, because that has the most flexibility. So let's start there. In general, when you don't own a property, there's the main way that a lot of people get into this game is through what's called arbitrage. And arbitrage is basically a super fancy way to say leverage, but you essentially rent out a place, so a single family home, an apartment, a condo, a townhome, whatever, but you rent out real property, and with permission of the owner, you then sublease it out as a short-term rental, and then you manage that business. And the great thing about this model is that you can get in for much less money than it costs to buy a property. And that's because all that you are paying for is to furnish the home and then to get it listed on your property management software like Guesty, Price Labs, etc. So if you were to do, say, a 1-bedroom, you could easily launch that for anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 upfront cost. And that's why for a lot of people wanting to run an Airbnb business, that is the Airbnb business model that they choose because it is a less expensive option. Now, the big challenge is that it can be tough to get landlords to or owners to say yes to that because they may not want the potential for parties. They may not want a bunch of people going in and out of the house. And I think you can certainly assuage those fears pretty easily. And if you follow the tips that I talk about on this channel, I don't focus a lot on arbitrage because I don't do it. I do this for real estate investing, but there are definitely some tried and true tips that I do in my business that you should be doing in your arbitrage business should you go down that road. But there are pros to landlords that I think a lot of people don't quite realize. And the first is that if you do this right, you should approach it going in saying, I'm gonna do this for at least 3 years. And so you can approach a landlord to say, hey, I'm really interested in renting your property. Would you be interested in a really long-term lease, such as a 3-year lease? And I know that when I had long-term properties, that having a lease that long would have been attractive to me because then it would have been less cost to turn over the property because generally people will come and go a year or 2 at a time. So there's less cost for turning over it, and your vacancy is guaranteed for that amount of time. So that's a real pro for landlords. Now, the other thing is that because you are cash flowing so much in an Airbnb business and through the arbitrage Airbnb business model, you're cash flowing quickly and you're cash flowing a lot, you can actually entice landlords by saying, hey, I will actually pay you an elevated rent for giving me the ability to run this business. So if someone is asking $1,500 for a 2-bedroom, you could say, hey, I'll pay $1,750 and I'll do it for 3 years. Like, that would be really enticing to a landlord because they're gonna earn so much more money in the deal. And then the other sort of pro for owners/landlords that I think doesn't get talked about enough is that essentially their property management is zilch. Because you are going to be running that business, you are going to then say, I will be responsible for maintaining the property, fixing anything that needs to get repaired, and inspecting that property on a very regular basis. In addition, it's getting professionally cleaned multiple times a week or however often your guests are going to be coming and going, so that the property manager, or if they don't have one, the owner, is really not going to have to do anything on that property while you are running that arbitrage business. So I think there are a lot of pros for landlords, and this could be a really enticing proposition for them. So be sure to include that in your talking points to potential landlords. So the other business model where you don't own a property is also arbitraging, but arbitraging land, so not real property. Now let's say there is a landowner out there, maybe they have a farm or they just have raw land, and you want to try out a glamping business. Now I'm very much a proponent for doing a glamping business the right way and not skirting regulations. But I do understand that like sometimes you just have to put out a test balloon to see if that business model is even viable. Now I wouldn't go to the point of like putting up a permanent structure or anything like that. I would do, hey, maybe like an Airstream, and you put it out there and you do a nice temporary deck with like decking tiles that you can get from Home Depot, and you get an inflatable hot tub or something like that. You don't put out any permanent infrastructure, but you say, hey, you know, in exchange for allowing me to use your property in this way, I'll pay you rent, or I'll, you know, pay you a fee, whatever arrangement you want to make. But that's essentially another way that you could use the arbitrage model, but for a slightly different type of Airbnb listing. Now the third, you also don't own property, but you are essentially the property manager. So you are a co-host or the host of that property. So someone owns it, they want to do short-term rentals, but they don't have time, they don't have the know-how, they do have the capital. So the arrangement that you make here is that they own and furnish the property, and then you run it from then on. So you write the listing copy, you get the photographs done, you put up the listing, you set up all of the property management software and the pricing software, you engage with guests. The owner is hands off, and you are running that business, and then you are taking a percentage of that business in exchange for your services. I've seen people do 10%, 20%, 25%, I think is pretty common. It's a great way to earn some extra cash and not own any property. Okay, so those are the three models so far that I've discussed where you don't own any property. Let's get into those Airbnb business models where you do own the property. Okay, so the first one is going to be more traditional. You own a home and you rent it out as a short-term rental. This is pretty generic. However, depending on the location of the home, that I think is going to drive the type of guest that you seek and the type of Airbnb business model that you run. So if you are in a very popular urban location, you're going to be getting travelers, people for business. You are probably going to be dealing with lots of restrictions on a short-term rental, but you know, you are potentially going to be occupied pretty well because it is a busy location. If you do more of like a suburban or potentially even more rural location, you want to make sure that you are located next to major amenities like hospitals, universities, etc. But for that, you are going to be getting probably like families or groups of people that are going to that location. Say people are relocating, or you have traveling professionals that come to that location from time to time. You know, that might be more of the like type of traveler that you are getting in that kind of Airbnb business model. So even though just owning a property is kind of like generic, there still is quite a bit of diversity in that type of Airbnb business model. Again, depending on your location and your proximity to things that people want to visit. Now, in the similar vein, you could also buy a multifamily property that is in an urban location, suburban or rural, and then all of the same things apply that I just talked about, but you're just doing it with multiple listings. All right, so the next business model would be to do what's called a hack. Now you could either do a house hack, which I actually am in right now, or you could do a land hack. Okay, so what is a house hack? A house hack is where you own a property, you live in it, and you rent out a portion. And that portion that you rent out, let's say you own a duplex like this. So I live in one unit with my boyfriend, and then in the other unit, we rent that out as a short-term rental. So we don't share any indoor space. There is common shared space like a backyard, but we don't really use that when guests are out. And that's pretty much it. It's a great way to eliminate your cost of living and earn extra cash on the side for owning a property and living in it. You could also do that, you know, in a single family home and either rent out rooms or other livable space. So let's say you have like a cottage, or you have a basement apartment, or you have a garage that's converted into an apartment. Any one of those would also be considered a house hack. And again, great way to cut or eliminate your living expenses. And that is why it is a great Airbnb business model and is one that I recommend that everybody do. Okay, so the last Airbnb business model, and this is within the owning the property space, is to do a land hack. And that's very similar, which is to what I just described, and is the model that we are pursuing right now to build our glamping business. You essentially buy a home that has a lot of acreage that is in the right zone that will allow you to do this, but then you can build additional structures that are glamping structures. So domes, tree houses, A-frames, mirror cabins, other unique structures like that. The great thing about this model is that you open yourself up to much more financing. You could do a residential loan, you could do a commercial loan, you could do a construction loan, and you can tie into the existing infrastructure already on that land or close to that land. So there's probably already a septic, there's probably electricity, and so you know that you have the ability to put those things on that land. So it makes it just a bit more feasible. So that is it. Those are the 5 different Airbnb business models that really anyone can do. I hope that you found this helpful. To become an Airbnb host, click the link down below. It's a referral code. You will get $75 when you host your first guest, and I will get a kickback as well. For my recommendations on furnishing your Airbnb, please check the description box down below. I've got links to everything for furnishing the kitchen, living room, bathroom, bedroom, outdoor space, all of it. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Come back soon. Bye-bye.